Dana Brown, Xojo's Director of Marketing. In this tutorial, we're going to focus on one of the new PDF document features available in Xojo 2021 Release 3. We're going to look at adding forms to our PDF documents. For this, we will use an example project that will let us create a document with a form and also test how the form data can be sent back to the URL set in a button form. Such URL can use HTTPS or Mail-to protocols. Also, the action supported by a PDF form button let the endpoint receive data as the full PDF file or as a series of key value pairs, where the key is the name of the control and value is the value typed or selected by the user. Let's start looking at how we can add controls to a PDF form. You can add the kind of controls equivalents to a text field, text area, and also allow the selection of values like a list box, pop-up menu, combo box, or one of the ones offering an on-off state like a checkbox and a radio button. Even in the case of a radio button control, it is also possible to configure them to act as members of the same group. This means that when the user clicks on one of the radio buttons, then the other buttons of the same group will be deselected. We can see in this line of code how we can create a new instance for a PDF text field control. To do this, we need to provide the constructor with the number of the PDF document pages where we want to add the control, also the X and Y coordinates, plus the control's width and height. Along with that, also the name of the control and the value assigned by the default. In this case, the PDF text field instance will display the string some sample text. This is exactly the same steps to follow when it's about creating a new PDF text area instance. Nevertheless, we can also set the maximum characters allowed property of the PDF text area instance in order to limit the amount of characters that the user can type in the control. In both cases, once we have created the instances, we only need to call the add control method on the PDF document instance in order to add these form controls to it. Adding a button to a PDF form is equally easy, but there are only ones that can have an action associated to them. We'll see this a bit later. When we're looking at adding a checkbox to the form, we can follow the same pattern using the constructor. In addition, we can also set the value property so it's displayed as checked or not checked by default. And we arrive to the creation of the radio button instances for PDF. In fact, we will see how we can create a radio button group. As you can see here, we are creating two radio button instances sharing the same value for the control name, group A in the example, while they have a different value associated with them, being option A for the first instance and option B for the second one. Next, we set the instance for the second radio button as the one selected by default. And finally, we add both radio button instances to the form in the document using the add control method. We repeat the same procedure in order to add a second group of radio buttons to the form. As you can see, these share the same name for the control and they have different values associated with them. When we're looking at adding a list box to the form using the constructor, we have two ways of providing the by default values. The first one is by passing along an array of strings, as we can see here. And the second one is passing the string values in the constructor itself, separated by a comma. That is a param array. Next, as we previously said, we can set the selection type for the list box between multiple rows or a single row. In addition, we can also set the selected value by default. Creating and adding combo box controls to the PDF form follows the same pattern. We can see how the values are provided separated by a comma instead of using a string array as we did for the list box. And this is exactly the same way to proceed in order to adding a pop-up menu control to the PDF form. Once again, we're using a string array to provide the values for the pop-up menu. Let's back up now to the button in order to see two of the three possible actions we can set to them. When it's about sending the form data, we can choose between Send Form or Send PDF File. When we set Send Form as the value to the action property, the form will send the data as a series of key value pairs. While if we choose Send PDF File, then the full PDF file will be sent to the endpoint. Such endpoint can be something like a web service or an email address. And for the key value pairs sent with the Send Form option, the key will be the name assigned to every control added to the form, while value will be the entered or selected data by the user for that control. Later, we'll see how this works in practice. Let's run the project. Our app also uses TCP IP sockets listening on the port 8080 for the local IP address, so it can receive and work with the form data when it is sent to the PDF file using the Send Form action. Let's test the form using the local URL as the endpoint and Send PDF File as the action set to the Send button added to the PDF form. When we click the Create PDF Document button, we can see how the PDF document is created in the desktop. And we open it using the PDF Viewer app, and we can see the form displaying all of the controls that we added to it and displaying the by default values set in code. Let's type some text in the form text field. Also in the text area control, let's also check this checkbox, changing the selected values on each radio button group. Let's see how the list box allows the multiple selection of values as we set in the code, and let's choose the value for the pop-up menu and the Combobox controls. In fact, we can also type any other arbitrary value in the field of the Combobox. Once we click the Send button, we can see how our example app has received the data, allowing us to save the full PDF file to disk. Once we confirm the destination path and name, the PDF file is shown in an HTML viewer control, and it includes the values entered by the user in the PDF Viewer app. Let's see the difference when we choose Send Form as the action for the Send button. So we create the PDF document again, opening it with the by default PDF Viewer, entering and selecting some values for the form controls. When we click the Send button this time, our app will receive the data as a series of key value pairs that are displayed in a modal window. As you can see, the window replicates the options and values entered by the user in the form using the PDF Viewer app. This is the text typed in the text field, the one for the text area, with both checkboxes checked and the same radio button selected on each group. It also displays the options chosen in the combo box and pop-up menu, and also all of the selected options for the list box control. And that's all. We've seen how easy it is to add forms to our PDF documents created with Xojo. However, and as defined by the PDF standard, it is only possible to add a form on each PDF document, but it is possible to add the form controls to any of the pages of the PDF, including the radio buttons pertaining to the same radio button group. In addition, when we add form controls to the PDF document, these don't include any kinds of decoration, like the rectangles surrounding the interactive areas or the labels associated with the checkbox or radio buttons. So you'll be in charge of drawing these yourself using the usual graphic methods. In fact, let's comment the lines of code that are adding these kinds of decorations to our example form. If we run our app now and create the PDF document again, we open it with our by default PDF viewer, we can see how the page looks from the rectangles surrounding the form controls and also the labels associated with the checkbox and radio button control. It only displays the interactive areas set in code for each one of the form controls. So don't forget to add all of the extra drawing to your forms, especially the text used as labels for the checkboxes and radio buttons. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below, and subscribe to our channel so you're notified when new videos are posted. Thanks for watching.